You think you know BTS. You know the sold-out stadiums, the chart-breaking records, the screaming crowds. Sure, but what about the version of BTS that moves in silence? No camera crews, no press releases, no fanfare. What about the moments that almost didn't make the news? Here's the thing. The biggest hearts in the room are often the quietest ones. And BTS, they've been writing checks, funding futures, and changing lives long before anyone was watching. Which member donated to a cause so personal it left fans completely speechless? Which one gave so much a university put their name on a building? And which act of generosity happened so quietly it took years for the world to find out? 7 members, 7 stories, and every single one will hit different. This is the top 7 donation moments that show BTS members' quiet generosity.
Number 7. Jungkook, the youngest who gave like a veteran. Don't let the title maknae fool you. In Korean group culture, the youngest member is supposed to be the one being taken care of, the baby of the group, the one who gets the last say, the one who's still learning the ropes. But Jungkook, he flipped that script so hard it left everyone stunned. Because when it came to giving back, this guy didn't wait until he was old enough or established enough. He just gave, and he gave big. Let's set the scene first. Jungkook was barely in his early 20s when stories started surfacing about his personal donations. Not company-led, not group initiatives, but him as an individual quietly moving money to places that needed it most. One of the most talked about moments came when Jungkook made a significant donation to help relief efforts during a period of intense national hardship in South Korea. No press conference, no Instagram post with a caption fishing for praise. The information only came out because the receiving organization was legally required to disclose large donations publicly, and even then, Jungkook never once brought it up himself. That's the detail that stops people in their tracks. In a world where celebrities announce their charity work before the check even clears, Jungkook's approach was almost aggressively humble. Think about the mindset that takes. You're one of the most famous people on the planet. You have hundreds of millions of eyes on you at any given moment. Every move you make becomes a headline. And yet, you choose silence. You choose to let the act speak entirely for itself with zero personal branding attached to it. That's not accidental. That's a value system. What makes Jungkook's generosity even more layered is the context of who he is within BTS. He joined Big Hit Entertainment at 13 years old. 13! He spent his entire adolescence in practice rooms, away from his family in Busan, grinding toward a dream that wasn't even guaranteed to pay off. He didn't come from wealth, he came from work ethic. So when he donates, it's not old money or inherited wealth being redistributed. It's money he earned through years of sacrifice most people can't even imagine. That emotional weight changes the meaning of the donation entirely. It's not a billionaire signing a check from a comfortable distance. It's someone who knows what it means to not have things, choosing to give anyway. And fans who understand his backstory feel that difference deeply. There's also something worth noting about the timing of his giving. Jungkook wasn't waiting to reach some arbitrary milestone, a certain number of albums sold, a certain level of fame, before he started giving back. The donations were happening alongside his rise, not after it, which suggests this isn't a PR strategy or a late career reputation move, it's just who he is. Sources close to the fandom have also pointed to Jungkook's known habit of quietly supporting small businesses and individual artists, buying work from independent creators, tipping generously, supporting people in his orbit who are still trying to make it. It's the kind of generosity that doesn't make headlines, but makes real differences in real people's lives. And perhaps the most Jungkook thing about all of this? When fans discovered the donation news and flooded social media with emotional reactions, he said nothing. No acknowledgement, no humble brag, nothing. Just continued on business as usual, like pouring out for others was just a completely normal Tuesday. Because for him, it clearly is.
Number 6. BTS V, the art lover who donated with his soul. There's something about V, Kim Tae-young, that has always felt different. Even within BTS, a group full of deeply complex and layered individuals, V operates on a frequency that's hard to put into words. He's the guy who references classical art in casual conversation, who names Van Gogh as a personal hero, who carries a camera everywhere because he genuinely sees the world as something worth documenting. So when V donates, you already know it's not going to be a generic charity check. It's going to mean something. It's going to be specific. And that specificity is exactly what makes his generosity hit so differently. The moment that truly defined V's philanthropic identity came through his deeply personal connection to the arts, specifically his support for struggling artists and cultural preservation efforts in South Korea. V made a notable donation to the Korea Arts and Culture Education Service, an organization dedicated to bringing arts education to underprivileged children across the country. Let that sink in for a second. This isn't a celebrity picking a trending cause to align their brand with. This is a man who genuinely bleeds art, who has talked openly about how music and visual arts saved him, shaped him, gave him language when he didn't have words, choosing to give that same lifeline to kids who might never have access to it otherwise. The personal resonance is almost overwhelming when you sit with it. But here's what makes the story even richer. V didn't just write a check and walk away. People who follow his journey closely know that his relationship with art is almost spiritual. He collects paintings. He studies photographers. He has spoken in interviews about how art communicates things that language simply cannot. So when he donates to arts education, he's not performing philanthropy. He's extending a deeply held personal belief that art is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And he's putting real money behind that belief for children who would otherwise grow up without ever knowing what it feels like to create something from nothing. What also stands out about V's giving is how it connects to his own story. Tae-young grew up in Daegu, in a family that wasn't wealthy. He didn't have every opportunity handed to him. He auditioned for Big Hit almost on a whim. He had accompanied a friend to the audition and ended up trying out himself. That accidental moment changed the trajectory of his entire life. And it was art, music, performance, expression that became the vehicle for everything that followed. So when he invests in making sure other kids have access to that same vehicle, it carries the weight of someone who genuinely understands what's at stake if they don't. There's also V's well-documented love for photography that adds another layer to this narrative. He has shared his own photography publicly, collaborated with artists, and consistently used his massive platform to shine light on creative work that deserves more attention. His generosity isn't confined to monetary donations. It extends to visibility, which in the age of social media is its own form of currency. When V reposts an independent artist's work to his hundreds of millions of followers, that's a donation of reach, of opportunity, of a chance, and he does it regularly without making a production of it. What the fandom has also observed over the years is V's quiet consistency. This isn't someone who gave once during a high-profile moment and never again. The pattern of support, financial, emotional, platform-based, runs through his entire career. It's woven into how he operates as a public figure. And the fact that so much of it only comes to light through third-party disclosures or eagle-eyed fans piecing together receipts says everything about his motivation. He's not doing it for the narrative. He's doing it because somewhere deep in his artistic soul, Kim Tae-young genuinely believes that beauty should be accessible to everyone, and he's willing to put his money, his platform, and his heart where his mouth is. Number 5. Jimin, the hometown hero who never forgot where he came from. There's a particular kind of loyalty that only comes from people who are deeply, unshakably rooted in where they began. Not everyone who makes it big carries their hometown with them. Some people run from where they came from, reinvent themselves completely and never look back. And then there's Jimin, Park Ji-min, born and raised in Busan, South Korea, who has made it about as big as a human being possibly can in the entertainment industry, and who has never, not once, let go of the city that made him. His donations aren't just generous, they're personal. They're a love letter written in funding, and the story behind them will make you feel things you weren't prepared to feel today. The headline moment that put Jimin's hometown generosity on the global map came when he made a donation of 100 million Korean won, roughly 84,000 USD, to students in Busan experiencing financial hardship. He donated specifically to provide scholarships and support for students at his own alma mater area, making sure that kids growing up in the same streets he did would have one less obstacle standing between them and their future. 100 million won, from a kid who left Busan as a teenager to chase a dream that could have gone nowhere. The emotional mathematics of that are staggering, but what makes this story cut even deeper is the context of Jimin's own journey through education and early life. He attended Busan High School of Arts, where he was actually the top student in the contemporary dance department. He was good, genuinely, exceptionally good, but talent alone doesn't pay tuition, doesn't cover living expenses, doesn't make the path easy. He knows what it means to be a young person with a dream and a limited safety net, and so when he writes a check to make sure other young people in Busan have more support than he did, it's not a wealthy celebrity performing generosity from a comfortable distance. It's someone reaching back through time to hand a lifeline to the version of himself that needed one. That image alone is enough to wreck you emotionally if you sit with it long enough. What also sets Jimin apart in this conversation is his consistency with Busan specifically. This isn't a one-time gesture tied to a career milestone or a PR moment. Over the years, multiple donations connected to Busan have been traced back to Jimin, supporting local communities, educational initiatives, and relief efforts in the region. The city of Busan isn't just a birthplace to him, it's an ongoing responsibility, a relationship he maintains with real, tangible investment. And Busan, for its part, has clearly felt that love returned. The city's connection to Jimin runs so deep that when South Korea was campaigning to host the 2030 World Expo in Busan, BTS and Jimin as a Busan native specifically became central to that cultural ambassadorship. But even that level of official recognition didn't change how Jimin operates behind the scenes. The donations kept coming quietly. The support kept flowing without announcement. There's something else worth sitting with here. The timing of Jimin's donations relative to his own financial journey. BTS members, despite being global superstars, operate within a system where financial independence takes time to build. The early years of a K-pop career are notoriously difficult financially, with debt to entertainment companies and tight contractual structures. So the fact that Jimin was donating at the scale he was, during periods when his own financial freedom was still being established, speaks to a prioritization that goes beyond logic. It's almost defiant in its generosity, like he decided that other people's needs would always come before his own comfort level. And maybe the most quietly devastating detail in this entire story is that Jimin has never, not in a single interview, not on a single live stream, not in any behind-the-scenes content, brought up his donations in a self-congratulatory way. Fans piece together the receipts, organizations release the disclosures, the story gets told around him, almost despite him, because Park Jimin is too busy actually helping people to spend any time talking about the fact that he helps people.
Number 4. Jung Ho-sek, the sunshine who donated in the dark. Here's the thing about J-Hope, Jung Ho-sek, that the world has slowly started to understand over the years. The sunshine persona, the relentless positivity, the guy who bounces into every room like he personally invented joy, that's real. That's genuinely who he is. But underneath all that brightness is someone with a depth of character and a seriousness of purpose that doesn't always make the headlines, because the headlines are too busy focusing on the smile. And when it comes to his generosity, J-Hope has been operating in that quiet, serious space for years, giving big, giving consistently, and doing it in a way that is so understated it almost feels like a deliberate philosophical stance against the culture of performative charity. Let's start with the moment that made the entire world stop scrolling. In 2022, it was revealed that J-Hope had made a donation of 100 million Korean won, approximately 83,000 USD, to the Community Chest of Korea, one of the country's most respected and established charitable organizations. But here's the detail that sent fans into an emotional spiral. The donation had been made before anyone knew about it. There was no announcement, no social media moment, no carefully worded statement from his team. The Community Chest of Korea disclosed it publicly, as they are required to do with major donations, and the internet absolutely lost its mind. Because this wasn't a reactive donation, a celebrity responding to a public disaster with a visible show of support. This was J-Hope, in the quiet of his own decision-making, choosing to give a life-changing amount of money to a cause he believed in, with zero expectation of recognition. Zero. And if the legal disclosure requirement didn't exist, there's every chance the world would never have known at all. That reality alone says more about his character than any interview ever could. But to truly understand why this donation hits the way it does, you have to understand where Jung Ho-sek comes from. He was born in Gwangju, South Korea, a city with a deeply significant and painful history, most notably the May 18th Democratic Uprising of 1980, an event that shaped the cultural and emotional identity of everyone who grew up there. Gwangju is a city that knows what it means to fight for something, to sacrifice for something, to carry a collective weight with dignity. And J-Hope carries Gwangju with him everywhere he goes, in his work ethic, in his values, and clearly in how he chooses to use his resources. There's also the layer of his personal journey that makes his generosity feel earned in the most visceral way. Before BTS, before the stadiums and the chart records, Ho-sek was a street dancer. Genuinely talented, grinding in a scene that offered passion but rarely offered financial security. He auditioned for big hit entertainment and was accepted, but the road from that audition to global superstardom was paved with years of grueling work, uncertainty, and the kind of pressure that breaks most people. He was also known within BTS's early days as a stabilizing emotional force for the other members, the one who kept the energy up when things got dark, who made people laugh when they wanted to cry, who held the group together with sheer force of warmth. That role, being the emotional backbone for others, seems to extend naturally into how he operates in the world. He gives, emotionally, creatively, financially. It's just what he does. What also distinguishes J-Hope's philanthropic pattern is the breadth of his giving. The community chest donation was massive, but fans tracking his generosity over the years have noted multiple instances of support for arts programs, for communities in need, for causes connected to youth development and education. It's not one big moment designed to make a statement. It's a sustained practice of giving that runs parallel to his entire career. And then there's something almost poetic about the contrast J-Hope represents. Here is a man whose entire public identity is built around bringing light, whose stage name is literally hope, quietly donating in the dark where no one is watching, where there's no spotlight to perform for. It's like the sunshine persona isn't a performance at all, it's a value system, and the donations are just one more expression of a person who has genuinely decided, at some core level, that his job in this world is to make things better for the people around him, whether that's through a performance that makes 50,000 people feel alive, or a bank transfer that will never make the news unless someone else decides to tell the story.
Number 3. RM, the leader who donated like he was building a legacy. If you had to design a person who would take philanthropy seriously, not as a PR strategy, not as a celebrity obligation, but as a genuine intellectual and moral commitment, you would end up with something that looks a lot like Kim Namjoon, RM, the leader of BTS, a man who reads philosophy books on tour buses, who visits art museums alone in foreign cities before the rest of the world wakes up, who writes lyrics that make people question the architecture of their own existence. So when we talk about RM's donations, we're not talking about someone who handed a check to a cause because their management team suggested it would be good for their image. We're talking about someone who has thought deeply, carefully, and with genuine intellectual rigor about what it means to use privilege responsibly, and the results of that thinking are nothing short of extraordinary. The moment that fundamentally changed how the world understood RM's relationship with philanthropy came through his consistent,
passionate, and financially substantial support of Korean art and cultural institutions. RM has made multiple significant donations to the National Museum of Korea and various Korean art foundations, supporting the preservation, promotion, and accessibility of Korean art at a level that goes so far beyond what anyone expected from a pop star that it genuinely reframed the conversation about what celebrity influence can look like. One of his most discussed contributions was a major donation to support Korean art exhibitions and museum programming, ensuring that Korean cultural heritage remains funded, visible, and accessible to future generations. And the reason this particular cause feels so specifically RM is because of how publicly and authentically he has lived his love for art. This is not a celebrity picking up a cause. This is a man who has spent years visiting galleries, studying artists, writing about visual art with the literacy of someone formally trained in it, and then putting serious money behind the institutions that protect and promote it. The personal and the philanthropic are completely inseparable here. But zoom out further, and the picture gets even more impressive. RM's cultural impact through donation isn't just financial, it's curatorial. When he visits an exhibition and posts about it, attendance spikes. When he mentions an artist, that artist's work sells out. When he advocates for Korean art on a global stage, which he has done, most famously in his speech at the United Nations, he is performing a kind of soft cultural diplomacy that has real, measurable effects on how Korean art is perceived and valued internationally. The donations are the financial expression of a cultural mission that runs through everything he does. And then there is the weight of who he is within the Korean cultural conversation. RM became the first Korean artist to address the United Nations General Assembly. He has been credited, alongside BTS as a whole, with fundamentally shifting global perceptions of Korean culture, contributing to the Korean wave in a way that has had genuine economic and diplomatic consequences for South Korea as a nation. So when he turns around and donates to the institutions that preserve and celebrate Korean culture, it creates this extraordinary feedback loop, using his global platform to fund the very cultural foundations that gave rise to the tradition he represents. It's almost strategically visionary in its coherence. What also strikes people when they dig into RM's philanthropic record is the intellectual intentionality behind his choices. He doesn't scatter his giving across trending causes. He invests deeply in specific areas: art, culture, Korean heritage, because he has clearly thought about where his resources can have the most meaningful, lasting impact. It's the giving of someone who has asked hard questions about legacy, about what survives after the fame fades, about what a life of influence should build in the world. And the answer he keeps returning to, with his time and his money and his platform, is this: culture survives. Art survives. The things that capture what it meant to be human in a particular place and time, those are worth protecting, worth funding, worth fighting for. And perhaps the most layered thing about RM's generosity is that it exists in complete tension with the pressure he operates under daily. He is the leader of the biggest band in the world. He carries the weight of representing not just BTS, but Korean music, Korean culture, and the aspirations of an entire generation of young people globally. That is an almost incomprehensible amount of pressure. And yet, in the middle of all of that, the schedules, the expectations, the scrutiny, he is quietly walking into museums, studying what needs support, and writing checks that will outlast any chart position he will ever hold.
Number 2. Jin, the oldest, who gave before he even had to. There is something about Kim Seokjin, Jin, the eldest of BTS, that has always carried a particular kind of quiet authority. Not the loud authority of someone demanding to be taken seriously, but the deep, settled authority of someone who simply knows who he are at a fundamental level. Jin has always been the member who marches to his own rhythm, the guy who made dad jokes on global stages without a single ounce of embarrassment, who cooked food for fans outside concert venues, who cried
cried openly and without apology when emotions hit him, who brought an almost radical authenticity to every single thing he did. And when it comes to his generosity, Jin operates with that same radical authenticity. No performance, no calculation, just a person who sees a need and fills it, with the calm confidence of someone for whom giving is simply the obvious thing to do. The story that defines Jin's philanthropic identity begins in a place that feels almost too on-brand for him, his hometown of Gwacheon and the broader context of his family background. Unlike some of the other BTS members who came from more modest beginnings, Jin grew up in relative comfort. His family ran a successful business, and he had access to opportunities that not every trainee walking through big-hit stores could claim. But here's what makes Jin's story genuinely remarkable. That background of relative privilege didn't produce complacency, it produced responsibility. And he has carried that responsibility with a seriousness that consistently surprises people who only know him through the dad jokes and the window wiper laugh. The donation moment that truly captured the world's attention came when Jin made a substantial contribution of 100 million Korean won, approximately 84,000 USD, to provide scholarships for students from low-income families. The donation was directed specifically toward giving young people access to educational opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have, funding futures, opening doors, removing the financial barriers that stop talented, driven young people from becoming who they're capable of becoming. And it was done in classic Jin fashion, without any announcement, without any public statement, without any social media acknowledgement. The organization disclosed it, the fans found out. Jin said nothing. But what makes this donation story even more emotionally complex is the timing relative to Jin's military service. South Korea has mandatory military service for all able-bodied men, and Jin, as the eldest BTS member, was the first to enlist, entering the military in December 2022. The period surrounding his enlistment was one of the most emotionally charged moments in BTS history. Fans were devastated. The internet was flooded with farewell messages, and in the middle of all of that emotional turmoil, before he walked through those military gates and disappeared from public life for an extended period, Jin was quietly making sure that his money was still doing good work in the world while he was gone. That detail is almost unbearably thoughtful when you sit with it. He wasn't just preparing himself for military service. He was making sure his impact on the world didn't pause just because his public presence had to. There's also a dimension of Jin's giving that goes beyond the financial and into the deeply personal, his relationship with food as an act of love. Jin is famously passionate about food. He has his own YouTube series centered around eating. He talks about restaurants, ingredients, and meals with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely believes that feeding people is one of the most meaningful things you can do for them. And this philosophy has translated into real, tangible acts of generosity. Stories of Jin personally providing meals for staff, for people working around him, for anyone in his orbit who needed to be taken care of. It's not the kind of thing that generates headlines, but it's the kind of thing that the people on the receiving end remember for the rest of their lives. What also strikes you when you trace Jin's pattern of giving is how consistent it is across different contexts and scales. From the massive scholarship donation to the quiet acts of personal care for individuals around him, the through line is always the same. A person who has decided, seemingly without drama or deliberation, that looking after other people is simply part of what he does. It doesn't require a special occasion, it doesn't require a camera, it doesn't require anyone to know. It's just Jin being Jin, the eldest, the one who sets the tone, the one who shows the others what responsibility looks like when it's worn with ease and without ego. And maybe that's the most profound thing about Kim Sok-jin's generosity. In a group of 7 extraordinarily giving people, he models what it looks like to give from a place of genuine wholeness, not from guilt, not from image management, not from the pressure of public expectation, but from the deep, settled conviction of someone who has simply decided that this is what people with resources do. They take care of others, quietly, consistently, and without ever once asking for applause.
Number 1. Suga, the quietest voice that roared the loudest. Brace yourself, because this one is going to hit differently from everything that came before it.
If you followed BTS long enough, you already know that Min Yoongi, Suga, is the member who operates most deliberately in the shadows. He is not the one bouncing into the room with infectious energy. He is not the one delivering charismatic speeches on global stages. He is the one sitting in the corner, watching everything, saying little, and then producing something so devastatingly precise and emotionally true that it stops you completely in your tracks. He has built an entire artistic identity around the power of restraint, around the idea that the most important things are often said in the quietest voice. And his philanthropy? It is the most perfect expression of that identity you could possibly imagine. So perfect, so consistent, so deeply rooted in who he actually is as a human being that when you see the full picture laid out in front of you, it doesn't feel like a charity story. It feels like a portrait of a person. Let's start with the number that made the entire world go completely silent. Suga, Min Yoongi from Daegu, South Korea, who grew up delivering newspapers on a bicycle in the freezing cold to help support his family, who slept in the Big Hit Entertainment studio because he couldn't afford proper accommodation during his trainee years, who suffered a serious shoulder injury and kept working through the pain because stopping wasn't something he could afford to do. That person donated 1 billion Korean won. 1 billion. That's approximately 800,000 USD, donated to the Hope Bridge Korea Disaster Relief Association to support victims of the Pohang earthquake that devastated communities in November 2022. 1 billion won from someone who once didn't have enough money to eat properly, from someone who knows, not abstractly, not theoretically, but in his bones, what it means to be in desperate circumstances with nowhere to turn. The emotional weight of that number coming from that specific person and that specific backstory is almost impossible to process rationally. It bypasses logic entirely and goes straight to something deeper. But to truly understand why this tops the list, you have to understand the full architecture of Min Yoongi's life, because without that context, the donation is impressive. With that context, it becomes something almost mythological. Yoongi grew up in Daegu in a family that struggled financially. This wasn't the romantic struggle of a movie montage. It was real, grinding, daily financial pressure that shaped how he saw the world, what he valued, and what he was determined to change about his own circumstances. He was passionate about music from a young age, but passion doesn't pay bills. So he worked. He delivered newspapers before school. He took part-time jobs. He fought for every inch of space he occupied in an industry that didn't make room easily for kids from Daegu without connections or financial backing. When he finally made it to Big Hit Entertainment as a trainee, the conditions were still brutal. He has talked openly in interviews and through his music, most devastatingly in his mixtape August D, about the depression, the anxiety, the physical pain, and the suffocating pressure of those early years. He slept in the studio. He pushed through a shoulder injury that would have sidelined most people because he was terrified that stopping meant losing everything he had sacrificed to get there. So when you hear that this man donated 1 billion won to disaster relief, that he reached into the resources he built through years of suffering and sacrifice and handed nearly $1 million to people who were losing everything, the transaction takes on a meaning that goes so far beyond charity, it becomes something closer to testimony. It's Yoongi saying in the only language he truly trusts, action, not words, I know what it feels like to have the ground disappear beneath you, and I will not let that happen to someone else if I can stop it. And the earthquake victims in Pohang weren't an abstract cause to him. Natural disaster relief is deeply personal in a Korean context. These are real communities, real families, real people whose entire material reality was destroyed in a matter of minutes. Yoongi, who knows what material precarity actually feels like, responded to that with everything he had available to give. But here's what elevates this story even further.
The donation wasn't announced by Suga. It wasn't teased, it wasn't built up, it wasn't revealed with a statement crafted by a PR team. The Hope Bridge Korea Disaster Relief Association disclosed it publicly, and the information detonated across the internet like a slow-motion explosion, with fans and media spending days processing what they had just learned. Yoongi himself? Complete silence. No acknowledgement, no response to the avalanche of emotional reactions flooding social media. He just moved on, as if donating 1 billion won was simply the next item on his to-do list, and he had already redirected his attention to whatever came after it. That response, or rather that non-response, is so fundamentally, recognizably him that it almost makes you laugh through the tears. Because of course, Suga donated nearly $1 million to earthquake victims and then said absolutely nothing about it. Of course, the man who titled his solo project August D, an anagram and reversal of his hometown and his name, a deeply personal artistic statement about identity and struggle, would express his deepest values not through a speech or a social media post, but through a bank transfer that he never intended anyone to know about. There is also something worth examining about what Suga's donation represents within the larger BTS philanthropic story. All 7 members give. All 7 members give quietly. But Suga's 1 billion won donation sits at a scale and carries a personal backstory that creates a kind of moral and emotional gravity that is genuinely difficult to match. It is the giving of someone who has been on both sides of the equation, who has needed help and didn't always have it, and who is now in a position to be the help that wasn't there for him. That full circle quality transforms the act of generosity into something almost redemptive. Not redemption for anything he did wrong, but redemption in the oldest, most powerful sense of the word. The buying back of something, the reclaiming of a narrative, the insistence that the story of a kid from Daegu who delivered newspapers in the cold and slept on a studio floor ends not in bitterness or hoarding or self-protection, but in 1 billion won flowing towards people who need it most. Min Yoongi looked at everything he had built through pain and sacrifice and decided that the most meaningful thing he could do with it was give it away to strangers who were suffering. Quietly, without applause, without acknowledgement, without even waiting to see how the story would be told. Because for Suga, the story was never the point. The help was the point. And that right there is why he sits at number 1.
And that's a wrap on the top 7 donation moments that show BTS members' quiet generosity. And honestly, if you made it all the way here, take a second. Because this wasn't just a list. This was a window into 7 human beings who could have chosen comfort, chosen silence, chosen to keep everything they fought so hard to earn, and instead chose to give. Quietly, consistently, without a single headline chased or a single camera invited. What makes BTS extraordinary isn't just the music, isn't just the records, isn't just the sold-out stadiums. It's this. It's the fact that behind every performance that makes millions of people feel seen, there are 7 individuals who are also doing the unglamorous, uncelebrated, unannounced work of making the world materially better for people they will never meet. From Jungkook's humble giving that defied his maknae title, to V pouring his soul into arts education, to Jimin writing love letters to Busan in the form of scholarships, to J-Hope donating in the dark while radiating light, to RM building a cultural legacy 1 museum at a time, to Jin stepping up with the quiet authority of someone who simply knows what responsibility looks like. All of it leading to Suga, the kid from Daegu who once couldn't afford a proper meal, donating 1 billion won without saying a single word about it. 7 members, 7 stories, 1 extraordinary truth. Real generosity doesn't need an audience. It just needs a heart big enough to act. If this moved you, share it, because stories like these deserve to be told, and the people behind them deserve to be known, not just as artists, but as human beings who chose, over and over again to be genuinely, quietly, magnificently good.